North Korea leveling some brand new threats against Guam overnight. The latest in a series of provocations between the U.S. and Pyongyang. Here to weigh in is Hudson Institute fellow and national security expert Rebecca Heinrichs. Thank you so much for coming in, Rebecca.
Good morning.
So the latest developments, we have Kim Jong-un's state-run media saying that North Korea's missile launch this week over Japan was only a prelude to an imminent strike on Guam. You have the U.S. Following up with the U.S. Missile Agency announcing a successfully shooting down a medium-range ballistic missile off the coast of Hawaii. What do you make of these latest moves from both sides?
Well, first of all, the missile flight that went over Japan, that was highly provocative. The last time there was a missile that flew over Japan was in 2009 and 1998, and those two were actually space launches. But this was the first time it was actually a missile that flew over. Very provocative, because if the missile breaks up in the atmosphere, if it the way it's not intended to, it could fall on innocent Japanese civilians, and of course there's American forces that are deployed there as well. So very highly provocative. These missile defense tests that the United States is conducting are very important. One, obviously, they help us test these purely defensive systems that can intercept incoming missiles. They also send a message that the United States has this ability. And so if North Korea were to shoot at American territory or the United States or an American ship, that we would have the technical ability to intercept that missile, and so it would not be worth the North Koreans from actually going that route.
Well, let's take a look at what President Trump had to say. He sent this message out on Twitter regarding North Korea yesterday. He said the U.S. has been talking to North Korea and paying them extortion money for 25 years. Talking is not the answer. But then at the same time, you have Secretary Mattis responding, saying that we are never out of diplomatic solutions, amongst some other things. So is there a discrepancy there between the two? What do you think?
I'm so glad you brought that up. If you actually go back and look at the transcripts, the reporter asked Secretary Mattis, she brought up the president's tweet, but then said, are we out of diplomatic options? And then he responded to that particular question and said, no. Diplomacy requires everything on the spectrum of military power short of actually using force. That means the credible threat of force. So I think Secretary Mattis complimented what President Trump said. If we're just going to talk to North Korea without preconditions, if we're going to relieve sanctions, because these are the things that they want, without requiring what is necessary, stopping their long-range missile program, stopping their nuclear program, then it won't work. It hasn't worked for 25 years. So yeah. I think actually Secretary Mattis is complimenting the president. He's not contradicting him.
Right, and we don't want to fall into the same trap that President Obama did with the red line, because we do want, if we say there's going to be consequences, there have to be consequences.
That's exactly right. And you want, again, you can't just talk. You do want a credible threat of force. And Secretary Mattis, if you go back and look at his other remarks previously in recent weeks, he said that the North Koreans should not launch a missile at the United States or U.S. territory, or we will retaliate and they will regret doing so. So clearly, Secretary Mattis is no dove here. We're trying to actually avoid conflict, trying to avoid war, and the best way to do that oftentimes is for a credible threat of force.
Yeah, context is so important. Rebecca, thank you very much for bringing that all into play for us. We appreciate you joining us this morning.